Welcome back to Quiz Gentry friends. Can you beat these Titanic's Iceberg-Encounter quiz? Let's find out. But before then, you may please consider subscribing for more maritime quizzes as we get started. Alright, the first question is simple and it says, what date did Titanic hit the iceberg? April 14th, April 10th, or April 12th? April 14th. Titanic struck the iceberg on April 14, 1912. Being the largest ocean liner in service at the time, led to one of the deadliest maritime disasters in history. 2. How long was the latter iceberg warning ignored? Was it for 2 hours, 30 minutes, or 3 hours? Two hours it was. After several warnings about sea ice, crew members on Titanic ignored the warnings for nearly 2 hours before the ship finally collided with one. What part of the ship was hit by the iceberg? Options are stern, starboard, or rudder. Starboard. With only a slim chance to initiate full avoidance of the iceberg considering how close she was to it. Her starboard side scraped along the iceberg. How tall was the iceberg above the water? 100 to 200 feet, 50 to 100 feet, or 200 to 400 feet. 50 to 100 feet. The iceberg that Titanic hit was approximated to be between 50 to 100 feet tall above the waterline, though the majority of it was submerged. 5. How much of the iceberg was visible above water? 10%, 30%, or 25%? 10%. Only about 10% of an iceberg is visible above water, with the remaining 90% submerged, which made the iceberg particularly dangerous to ships. What was the iceberg made of? Ice, snow, or rock? Ice. The iceberg that the Titanic collided with was made entirely of ice, though some icebergs form from snow, but considering the presumed origin of the iceberg Titanic encountered, icebergs from ice are majorly formed. This takes us to our next question. Where was the iceberg likely from? Greenland, Iceland, or Antarctica? Greenland. The iceberg was likely formed in Greenland and drifted into the North Atlantic, eventually leading to its encounter with Titanic. What type of collision occurred with the iceberg? Head-on, glancing, or full frontal? Glancing? The Titanic experienced a glancing blow with the iceberg, which scraped along its side rather than hitting it head-on. What time did the collision occur? 11:40 p.m., 12:15 a.m., or 11 p.m.? (11:40 p.m.) The Titanic struck the iceberg at exactly 11:40 p.m., initiating a series of events that led to its sinking. Question 10. How many iceberg warnings were received? 7, 5, or 6? 6. On the day of the disaster, Titanic received 6 iceberg warnings from other ships in the area, highlighting the perilous ice conditions in the North Atlantic, but these warnings were not fully heeded. How wide was the iceberg at its base? We have 500 feet, 400 feet, or 700 feet. What do you think? 400 feet. The iceberg was approximately 400 feet wide at its base, making it a formidable obstacle that was difficult to avoid. How many compartments flooded after the collision? 6, 4, 5. 5. The collision with the iceberg caused at least 5 of the Titanic's watertight compartments to flood, which was more than the 4 designed for the ship to stay afloat. What ship spotted the iceberg before Titanic? Californian, Carpathia, or Olympic? Yes, it was Californian. The SS Californian, which was nearby, had spotted the iceberg earlier, but was unable to warn Titanic in time to prevent the collision. Where was the iceberg first spotted from? Do you think it was crow's nest, bridge, or deck? Crow's nest. The iceberg was first sighted by lookouts stationed in the crow's nest of the Titanic, but by then it was too late to avoid the collision. 15. What was the Titanic's speed at impact? Please like this video. Thank you. "22 knots. Titanic was traveling at a speed of 22 knots when it struck the iceberg, a speed considered too fast for the icy sea. What exactly led to Titanic's collision with the iceberg? Negligence, disregard, or fog? Yes, it's disregard. Despite receiving several warnings of sea ice on the very day, she was still traveling at approximately 41 km/h when her lookouts spotted the iceberg. The ship, unable to turn swiftly enough, resulted in a glancing blow that buckled her starboard. How much did the iceberg weigh? 1 million tons, 500,000 tons, or 200,000 tons? $1 million tons. The iceberg that Titanic collided with is estimated to have weighed around 1 million tons, due to its enormous size and density. How cold was the water at the time of sinking? 28 degrees Fahrenheit, 32 degrees Fahrenheit, or 31 degrees Fahrenheit? 28 degrees Fahrenheit is correct. The water temperature was 28 degrees Fahrenheit, minus 2 degrees Celsius, which is below freezing and contributed to the high mortality rate among passengers and crew. Why couldn't the Titanic turn when they saw the iceberg? Was it due to wind intensity, decision delay, or ship's weight? Decision delay. The Titanic's failure to avoid the iceberg was primarily due to the delay in taking action rather than the ship's weight. The helmsman initially turned the ship in the wrong direction before the correct maneuver was made, but it was too late. The weight of the ship did contribute to its momentum, but the critical factor was the delay in turning. 20. What time was the first iceberg warning received? 9 a.m., 1:45 p.m., or 7:30 a.m.? (1:45 p.m.) it was. Titanic received its first iceberg warning at 1:45 p.m. on April 14, 1912, several hours before the actual collision occurred. At what distance did Titanic sight the iceberg in the sea? Please consider subscribing. Thank you. 457 meters. As per the British inquiry following the incident, the iceberg was roughly a quarter of a nautical mile, or 457 meters, when it was first spotted. Given the ship's speed of 22.5 knots, the iceberg would have been sighted approximately 40 seconds before the collision. What was the height of the iceberg underwater? 400 feet, 100 feet, or 300 feet? (300 feet). The submerged portion of the iceberg extended about 300 feet below the water's surface, making it difficult to fully assess the danger. How many degrees did Titanic turn before impact? 5 degrees, 20 degrees, or 10 degrees? (10 degrees). Titanic made a 10-degree turn to starboard in an attempt to avoid the iceberg, but the ship's speed and size made it impossible to steer clear in time. How many minutes did Titanic take to sink after impact? We will love to know what you scored. Thank you. 160 minutes. After striking the iceberg, Titanic took approximately 160 minutes to fully sink, during which time lifeboats were launched and distress signals sent. The last question says, what kind of iceberg did Titanic hit? Tabular, pinnacle, or dome? Tabular. Though Titanic may seem to have collided with a pinnacle iceberg, but characterizing it by the flat top and steep sides, typical of icebergs originating from Greenland, it is tabular. Thank you for watching, friends. See you in the next quiz. Bye-bye.